I'd always taken comfort in the predictability of my life. Weekdays were filled with work, and evenings were for small pleasures, fixing things around the house, unwinding with a cold beer, and playing hockey with friends on weekends. My wife, Lily, and I had built what I thought was a solid, steady life together. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed sooner, like moments of distance that crept in, almost unnoticed. At first, the changes in her were so subtle that I brushed them off. She missed my Ethanls more often and gave quick excuses for late nights. But I put it down to work stress or the type Ethan ups and downs every marriage goes through. Still, over time, these little moments grew. Lily's work trips became more frequent, and while I wanted to believe her, each trip seemed to put a little more space between us. One winter night, that space became a chasm. Lily was supposed to be away on a business trip to Houston for the weekend, and I'd settled into a familiar routine when she was out of town. I'd stocked up on snacks and set up a marathon of my favorite war movies, the ones she never liked. Halfway through Band of Brothers, I heard my phone ring. Seeing "unknown" on the Ethanl ID, I grumbled, thinking it was probably Paul Ethanling to talk about the game. But when I answered, a woman's voice, Ethan but tense, asked, "Is this Mr. Rigby?" Confused, I replied, "Yes, who's Ethanling?" She introduced herself as Detective Harris from Vale and told me that Lily had been in a serious accident and was currently in the hospital at Eagle Valley. My mind blanked for a moment, trying to make sense of her words. "That's impossible," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "My wife is supposed to be in Houston." Detective Harris was silent for a moment before she asked me when I last spoke to Lily. My stomach tightened as I told her it was the previous evening. "We found her with her ID listing your home address," she said, her tone unwavering. Still, the possibility that it was a mistake kept nagging at me. Maybe someone had stolen her ID. But the detective's request was clear, they needed me to come down and confirm her identity. As I headed out for the 2-hour drive to Vale, my mind raced. I tried to shake the thought, but suspicion started clawing its way into my mind. Could she really be lying to me about her trips? The drive to Vale was long and filled with a whirlwind of thoughts that wouldn't let up. Each mile seemed to unravel another memory, another clue I'd missed or ignored. As I replayed our recent conversations, I realized how often Lily had dodged simple questions about her work trips. Each excuse now felt flimsy, as if the foundation of our life together had been built on sand, slowly eroding without me noticing. A dark thought crept in, could she really be lying about everything? I told myself it couldn't be true, but the seed was planted, and I couldn't shake it. Memories of my own family's turmoil crept in, and my stomach twisted. I thought of my dad, once a great detective himself, who'd been shattered by my mother's betrayal. His suspicion had turned him into a controlling shell of the man I remembered, and he never fully recovered. Then there was my brother Daniel, who had taken things to a violent extreme when he found his wife cheating, landing him in prison. I'd always promised myself I'd never let anyone break me like that. But now, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, forced to confront the same gut-wrenching fear that had consumed my family. As I neared Vale, the air in the car grew thick, my mind replaying the detective's words over and over. If I found out Lily had betrayed me, I was certain of one thing, I wasn't going to cling to a marriage built on lies. I'd walk away, even if it meant starting from scratch. When I finally pulled up to the hospital, the gravity of the situation hit me hard. I took a deep breath and walked through the entrance, half wishing I'd wake up to find this was all some bad dream. At the information desk, I explained who I was, and they directed me to the ICU. My hands felt cold as I reached the floor, the reality settling in. I was led to a nurse who briefed me on Lily's condition, her voice soft as she warned, "She's sedated and doesn't look like herself due to the injuries. She won't hear you, but you should be prepared." I steeled myself, determined to keep Ethan, but my heart raced as I walked through that door. There, lying in the hospital bed, was a woman with the same height and build as Lily, but I could barely recognize her. My mind clung to hope. "Are you sure it's her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The nurse nodded, lifting the blanket slightly to reveal a small tattoo on her thigh, a Jiminy Cricket she'd gotten before our wedding. It was supposed to symbolize her family, something she said made her feel grounded. And just like that, the last of my doubts faded. This was Lily. But as I stood there, looking at the woman I thought I knew, one question grew louder in my mind: if she was supposed to be in Houston, why was she really here? After leaving the hospital that night, they handed me Lily's belongings, neatly packed into a small bag. I started sifting through it, hoping to find something that would make sense of all this. But one thing was missing: her phone. That little device held the answers to every question racing through my mind. I remembered that a friend of mine had developed a phone tracking app to help his partner keep track of a constantly misplaced device. Lily had lost her phone a few times before, so I'd installed the app on hers, too. I opened the app, entered her number, and saw a blinking dot show up just 4 miles away, at a ski lodge further up the mountain. With dread tightening in my chest, I followed the GPS directions, winding my way up toward the lodge. Her location led me to an Ethanl resort, filled with luxury cars lining the lot. I parked and headed toward the lodge, feeling a strange mix of anger and numbness. Whatever was waiting behind that door was about to blow my life wide open. When I reached her room, I hesitated, listening for any sound inside, but all was quiet. I tried the hidden keycard Lily kept tucked inside her travel boots, a habit she picked up after losing her hotel key once. I swiped the card, and the door clicked open, revealing a dimly lit room. Inside, everything was a little too perfect. Her suitcase was packed neatly on the bed, her phone charging on the nightstand, and her laptop on the desk. The bed was made, but the covers were slightly rumpled, like someone had slept there but tried to cover their tracks. I checked the bathroom and noticed damp spots on the sink. The soap was still in the shower, and though the towels were stacked, they were damp at the bottom. Someone had been here, and they'd tried to leave the room looking untouched, but they hadn't done a great job. Back by the bed, I picked up Lily's phone. There were no messages, no recent Ethanls. Everything was wiped clean. She'd always been organized, but this felt too ethangulated. My mind raced as I realized that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Lily had gone to lengths to hide something from me. I sat at the small desk, turning on her laptop. As it powered up, I noticed her browser history and emails were completely cleared. She'd never been one to delete anything. A sick feeling grew in my stomach as I understood what this meant. Whatever was going on, she had planned to cover her tracks. And now, standing in this staged room, I knew there was no simple explanation waiting for me back at the hospital. The next morning, I was done waiting for the truth to come to me. I needed answers, so I went to Lily's office, hoping someone there could shed light on her so-ethanled work trip to Houston. Her boss, Bernie, greeted me with his usual cheer. After some small talk, I cut to the chase. "Bernie, can you tell me why Lily would leave the Houston conference and end up in Vail?" Bernie gave me a confused look. "Houston? She wasn't in Houston for a meeting." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "That conference was for the new hires, not for a manager like Lily." I felt my stomach drop. So, this trip to Houston was a lie. I dug deeper, asking about her other trips to Indianapolis, supposedly for training. His answer was blunt: "Those are short meetings, maybe 2 or 3 days at most. I can't imagine why she'd need 2 full weeks for those." My suspicions hardened into something undeniable. Lily had been lying to me for a long time, taking extended trips with a story carefully crafted to keep me in the dark. Leaving Bernie's office, I could barely see straight, anger and betrayal bubbling over as I walked back to my car. Ethanl from Detective Harris snapped me back to the present. She told me they'd found records tying Lily to someone named Ethan Davis, a colleague I remembered her mentioning once or twice. According to Phillips, Ethan had rented a room at the same resort in Vale, and they planned to bring him in for questioning. She asked if I wanted to be there, and I agreed without hesitation. Later that day, I sat outside the interrogation room, just out of view. Through the glass, I watched Ethan, a man I'd never met in person but somehow felt I already knew. He had the look of someone who'd always talked his way out of trouble, his face shifting between nervous smiles and blank stares. When Phillips asked him about his relationship with Lily, his smirk faded, and he finally started talking. He confessed. 6 years, he said, they'd been involved. I gripped the edge of the chair, feeling like I was sinking, barely able to hear the rest of his story. They'd spent years sneaking around, blending work trips with their own hidden weekends, crafting a private life built on deception. He even had the gall to say he loved her, as though that somehow justified it. Once the questioning wrapped, I walked into the room. Ethan looked up at me, and I felt a twisted satisfaction at the fear in his eyes. I leaned in close and, in the coldest voice I could muster, said, "I hope she was worth it." Turning my back on him, I felt a bitter finality settle over me. Whatever life Lily and I had built was gone, shattered into 1,000 pieces I had no interest in picking up.